You want to go into that type of setting, especially with an interview, with as much tools in your tool belt as you can. So I would say always lean toward the side of doing maybe a little too much research.
Welcome to the Final Round podcast, where our mission is to help you knock out the competition and land your dream job.
Have you heard of MasterClass, Coursera, Turnitin, Coursehero, and Handshake? Our guest today is the head of talent at GSV Ventures, an early stage investment fund that has invested in all of these companies and manages over $270 million in assets. We are lucky to have Amanda Porter, who supports talent acquisition and performance management across GSV Ventures and its portfolio companies. Here's some questions we will be answering. How to know if VC or venture capital is right for you? How do you break into VC? What are the personality traits of an ideal professional in VC? How sports can translate to real-world job skills? Is working for a startup beneficial prior to joining a VC? What to research about the VC firm prior to a coffee chat or interview? And what questions are asked in VC interviews? Let's dive in. What is going on, Amanda? Thank you so much for being on the final round.
Of course, thanks for having me, AJ. Really appreciate it.
Of course. So on the show, we've spoken to a few recruiters in the past who have been interns at the same company that they now recruit for full time. And I saw that you previously led talent acquisition at a startup prior to being the head of talent at a top VC or venture capital firm like GSV Ventures. So do you think it's helpful to be in the startup world prior to then pivoting to the VC side?
Yeah, that's a great point, great question. So I definitely think this is one area that there's pros and cons to both sides. So I think, speaking on behalf of personal experience and other types of VC individuals, that whether they're on the investment team or on what I would consider myself being a bit more platform operational team, coming from startups themselves. So speaking to that first, there's definitely a huge growth opportunity there to bring to the table on the VC side when it comes to founder empathy. And that, is something you can certainly start to develop if you haven't been at a startup by talking to a lot of founders. Naturally, you're going to be doing that in the role anyways. But just being there essentially on ground zero with these founders, going through the growing pains, the inevitable changes that happen daily sometimes, the rapid speed of which you move. It's more I guess it's just easier to digest when you're there yourself. So whether it's internship experience while you're going through undergrad or your MBA program, if you can get any hands-on experience in a startup, I'd say if you're going to plan for that VC type role afterward, anything operational, working closely with the founders if you can, would be great to kind of aim for. But yeah, definitely pros and cons to either one. There's again a little bit of learning on the job you can do when it comes to really gaining and growing your founder empathy, just to be able to speak to founders, to understand what they're going through. It's truly one of those things that you cannot understand it yourself unless you've seen it firsthand. And whether you're a founder yourself and you've experienced that, or you've worked at an early stage startup, it's really just hard to get that.
I think those are all great points. And I've actually had the privilege to intern at companies as large as the Walt Disney Company, but also as
Yeah.
small as a very early stage startup. And it's so interesting to see that the goals, the metrics, how the team operates is just so different. So really having that boots on the ground experience is essential, especially being on the VC side. And I know that, your main day-to-day is focused on bringing the best talent, right? Not only for employees to come into GSV Ventures, but also to help with the talent strategy in the portfolio companies of the startups that you actually invest in. So I guess a great question, the $1 million question would be, what is your talent strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when it comes to VC talent individuals, hiring internally, for my team, whether it's here at GSV, even prior to PackBack, first and foremost, talent strategy really comes down to the profile of hire. So, when you think of the role that you are hiring for, you have to really envision who it is the right person for in this role, especially if you haven't hired for this role before. Obviously, it gets a little bit easier to kind of grasp that and really understand it as you see people in the role. You can kind of assess, the pros and cons. That's always going to evolve, also as your company evolves. I think one interesting thing, obviously at a startup, and then not obviously at a VC, is that I think pretty much every VC is some, they operate a lot like a startup. So the similar aspects there really boil down into when you're building talent. You have to really understand that profile of hire. Otherwise, you're probably going to veer too far off the path. You also have to understand that there's chapters or seasons, you could call them. So every quarter, but more so like as companies scale, you naturally go through seasons, and so you're going to naturally start to know or notice that you're ending a season and getting ready to start into a new season when you reach certain growth stages. So you're going to see this mostly in the startup world. So that naturally is going to equate to different types of hires, different departments maybe being, showcased or developed. Maybe some people leaving the company because they're no longer, the right fit. Not every team member is going to be a fit for each season or stage, and that's okay. I think founders, it's something really important for them to just kind of keep in the back of their mind. If I have any founders listening, but in the VC space, I think of it in a similar sense. So I like to think of things in seasons. In the VC side, you can more so look at that on, the fund growth, whether you're fundraising for your next fund, you're in the midst of raising for a current fund, or, deploying capital. So depending on where, the stages are, in that sense, it can really dictate who you need on your team and when.
I think the main takeaway though is that you said that it comes in seasons, right? And it's hard to predict because every startup is different. And from afar, I think a lot of people can assume that not many startups were able to survive the pandemic. But I would actually counter that by saying that some companies are actually doing better because of the pandemic. And I know that GSV Ventures actually has a focus on those ed tech companies that are probably, as I'm sure, obviously you being inside of the company, has had exponential growth, right? Like MasterClass and Coursera, and I think it was Photomath, right? So these companies that
Mhm.
are used even more because of COVID. And I think that for a candidate trying to get an internship or job at these startups, it's important to do research and really understand where the company's at and what their hiring needs are. And on that road of preparing to either apply or to reach out to a recruiter or head of talent like yourself, it's important to really prepare your LinkedIn and your resume. And I remember when I was kind of in that shoes of that job candidate, I was always trying to figure out what experiences from my life I should put on my resume or LinkedIn. And I saw that on your LinkedIn, you don't just have all of your very professional experience, like being the head of talent and being, at the talent acquisition lead at your past startup, but you also have some other roles like driving for Uber, being an assistant manager at a gym, as well as the third one was being a camp counselor. And I'm curious
Mhm.
to know, what advice would you give for someone who's trying to figure out if they should put those types of jobs, as in being a server at a restaurant or a lifeguard, for instance, that's not necessarily super relevant to what you're applying to?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I actually don't think I've ever been asked that before, so I appreciate you asking that. And so thinking about this one, one thing that I would say appreciate about LinkedIn is that you actually have the flexibility to add basically everything to that profile. Job experience, education, certifications. There's LinkedIn courses and other things that you can showcase that you're doing on there. Obviously, you can put a ton into your summary. So it's a lot more malleable than a resume that ideally, depending on if you're under 10 years of experience, especially, you're only going to keep that to one page, and probably just highlight your most recent roles. If you're, coming out of school, it's probably going to be your internships, maybe some summer jobs if you had those. So that's a big reason why I kind of just have dumped everything onto my LinkedIn. One thing that part of, just what falls into my values, I bring a lot of vulnerability into my day to day in my career. For me, I think it's very important, especially being in a talent based role. I consider myself a connector, people forward type person. So I want to put my full self out there. And part of that, in the professional world is doing that on LinkedIn. And so I've just showcased really everything I've done since, college. So camp counselor for a summer in college, I have my first couple of jobs out of college. And then what I love about it too, is it's on my LinkedIn, I can showcase and have the story to bring up in conversation about why and when I made the pivot into talent and recruiting, on the link on my resume now because of my more recent roles. If I were to show you my resume today, it's not going to have any of that. It'll come up during the interview process possibly, but my resume has that, and then usually it's a conversation starter. People can kind of see that natural progression. So I had what I call my year hiatus of really figuring out what I wanted to do a couple years out of college. I went to school for sport management, thought all I wanted to do was something in sports, personal train or be a sports performance coach. So I did that for a bit. Ultimately, led and managed a health club, opening up a new franchise. And what I really loved was the hiring and training of my team. And so I took that year, was actually a full-time nanny for a couple of different families in downtown Chicago. Also drove for Uber and Lyft, worked a couple of other part-time jobs, because I really wanted to be able to take the time away and say, okay, I'm going to shift my focus. I'm going to really lean into my mentor network and figure out what's next in my career. And that's truly when I made the pivot into talent recruiting, and haven't looked back since, and truly appreciate going through all of that. It was super frustrating, as anyone can imagine, I'm sure, going through education, spending all that money and time. And that's the beauty of the world that we're in now, especially, being at GSV, all ed tech digital learning focused. All of our companies are primarily focused on the ongoing education, in the classroom, outside of the classroom. But yeah, so long-winded answer, but really it's a storyteller, and that's the beauty of LinkedIn, is you can showcase all of that.
And I love how you still have them, on your profile. I remember some of my biggest takeaways from certain experiences were not just internships at companies, but it was actually minimum wage jobs as a busboy, or as a food runner, or even as a server, because you're forced to work in these fast-paced work environments. And yes, maybe it's not the most prestigious job, but I think learning how to get your hands dirty and working,
Mm.
10, 12-hour shifts all on your feet. I mean, it's a grind. And I think that there are a lot of takeaways there that, yes, of course, after that I was able to intern and then actually get a full-time job. But those are the early days. And I think that is really important to draw your story and not just say, oh, I'm a server, but what does that really mean, right? Is it a fast-paced environment? Is it crazy busy when you're working there? So I love how you still have that, and it's still part of your story even today. And one of the things that you said is you talked about your passion for sports. And we've spoken to some past recruiters. One of them was the Tesla recruiter who was a swimmer in college. And I know that you are not just someone who goes to the gym and enjoys sports, right? If my research is correct, I saw that you have completed 9 marathons. You have cultivated relationships with brands from Lululemon and Nike, and you also represent Chicago Windrunners, which is Nike's first elite all-female running team dedicated to aspire women to run and quote unquote chase after their dreams. So I'm curious to know, do you think that the competitive background of sports from your life has translated to being a competitive professional in the VC space?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing a bit of research on that front. Yeah, it's no hidden secret that my passion, my second full-time job, if you will, is running. Running has been a huge part of my life since really senior year of high school. I've been an athlete my whole life. I think I tried just about every sport. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a ton of sports out there, but the main ones: volleyball, soccer, basketball, softball. I did taekwondo for a bit. I tried a little bit of everything, for the most part, but running is something that it's me and myself for the most part, but it's also a team competitive sport. So it definitely is something that I carry into my full day to day. It has been, in the classroom, in the work setting. And so I'm very grateful for the fact that I got to compete in indoor, outdoor track in college and cross country. So I'm naturally a distance runner, and since college, I've been focusing on the marathon. So as you called it, I've done 9 since. I'll do my 10th one in June. fingers crossed that nothing happens COVID wise and it cancels, but that's up next. And then actually this fall, I'm doing my first ultra. I'll be doing a 50 miler. So a lot of big things in the works. Definitely my second full time job, a lot of hours in the week. But honestly, the days where I don't run every other week, I usually have an off day, or if something happens, life, I'll take an off day here and there. But those are the days I actually find myself a little less able to focus in my best way during the workday. So it's always been a fine line of making sure that running is never too strenuous on my mind or my body, but it truly is like how I just clear my head. It's a natural therapy session. It's probably really the only time that I'm away from screens. I'm away from like having to give answers to anyone, and I process a lot. I tend to kind of lean into my creative flow when I'm on solo runs, but then I have a lot of friends and teammates that I run with too. So running again could be, going back to me being a connector. It's been truly, just impactful for me in my life. The friendships that I've made, the other connections, even work related, that I've made through running is just it's outstanding. So it's one piece of advice I can give anyone. It's if you can find something, it doesn't have to be athletics or fitness related, but something outside of work that that really provides a community. Because for me, especially in Chicago, the running community here is just incredible. And so, when you can lean into that, I think it's super nice. I think naturally we, grow close to our coworkers, which is awesome, and everyone, should be doing. We have our friends, we have our family. It's something else, so anything that you can lean into there, it's something that's naturally going to carry over into your day to day and your work. And yeah, running has for sure been that for me.
I can completely relate because my running is actually surfing, and it's something that you can do on your own as well as with friends or family, or even colleagues. I've surfed with some colleagues recently. That's been really fun. But I do think that the main takeaway is there is a competitive aspect, right? Because you don't just run to run, you also enter to compete in races. So how is that really translated to the work side, right? Because a VC not only has to compete for the best talent to work for the VC, right? But you also have
Mhm.
to compete for the best startups to join your portfolio. And then lastly, and most people don't think about this, I just learned this, is that VCs also have to compete for money for each funding round, right? They have to, have that funding to fund the startups. So how is it translated for you in your career within VC?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I think for me and in my role specifically, the way that it really carries forward, it's for me being a distance runner, especially, I lean into like having a lot of endurance, and not just physically. So like kind of a mental endurance, like durability. So it takes a lot to really wear me down. I'm very proactive. I'm always, kind of just like high engine curiosity. And I think that comes a lot from just me being a high energy person in general. So part of that energy goes towards running. The other part of that really does go toward my work. I'm grateful to be in a career path of something that I, worked hard to realize I want to be in, when it comes to talent and allowing my connector side to play out in this space. So for me, it really carries forward that way. I don't I say I don't back down easily, but I mean that in a really good way. It's so when it's if I have a lofty goal, or a deadline that is super soon, or whatever it may be, I'm able to really break it out. So my training has also helped me with that. I realize, June 19th, of this year, I have my marathon. So I have a coach. I've had my same coach for 5 years now. And so, I invest in him, and he gives me my training plan. It's always broken down weekly and daily with workouts, long runs, easy runs, all factored in. So I know exactly, what I have for that week. And I do the same thing in my day to day in work. So if I have a goal to hit, I know I'm gonna, try to pace it out if I can. Sometimes timelines don't fully allow that. But if I can chip away at it a little bit every day, once you do reach that goal, quote unquote, crossing the finish line kind of thing, it's much more rewarding. So I think if anything, running has allowed me to have that kind of mental state. to be able to break down goals. And so and my team knows this. I know Packback knows this for sure. I break things a lot. I like to see conversions. I like to see what effort has been forward to the return. And so I think that does correlate and translate really nicely into my role. I also feel like my running, and I hope anyone that I've ever connected with, whether they've been a candidate I've interviewed or someone maybe I've networked with, has felt this from me. I think it allows me to have a little bit more openness than I'd say I already do have, because I love to hear about what people do, outside of work. I love to hear about their passions and why they've chosen this career path, because I appreciate, everything that I've gone through in my life to find mine. And so if I can help people, figure that out as well, and hopefully find their next role that they end up loving, it's just really special to me. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for all of the, whether they're student athletes or just general athletes or people who like to, compete or just play a sport out there, it should add to your story, right? If you do it recreationally on the weekends, maybe not so much, but if it's something where, it really is a part of you, like you said, because you are a runner, you like to achieve your goals, right? You like to break records. And that is something that most companies would want in a professional joining their team. So I think that is a great example of using your background in sports to add to your story. And I think the most mind-boggling thing about your story, when I was reading a few articles about your background, and even after completing 9 marathons on track for your 10th, is that you originally said that you thought of running as a punishment, right? And I have to know, what was it that, changed your mindset from it being a punishment to something that you enjoyed and liked to do? And how can our listeners think of recruiting not as a punishment, like they have to go through this and it's just so dreadful, but actually that they can enjoy it and thrive and get that dream job?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the punishment aspect really came from when I was pretty serious about basketball in high school. And for those that have seen me stand up, not on a screen, no, I'm only 5'2", so basketball was never going to be my forever, whether it be student athlete wise or career wise. And I knew that, but I was a fairly good shooting guard and loved it, but when it came to punishment in basketball, it meant running up and down the court, up and down the court, sometimes for an hour nonstop. And so it naturally became, and same thing with other sports I played, softball. Soccer, of course, you're always running, but also volleyball. If we weren't doing well in practice, or if we lost a game, I lost a tournament, it meant running. And so naturally, I just kind of correlated running to being a punishment until my senior year of high school, when I started doing distance and realized running actually became more of an escape, and going back to being more of a therapy session, and more so about me actually enjoying the process of it, rather than it's like, oh gosh, it's this thing I have to do, it's gonna hurt, maybe a little, maybe a lot, it's gonna take up time, all of the stuff. And so I think translating that over into interviewing and going through the job search, of course, it's not anything that we humans have been evolved to do. It's something that we as a society have really built up and have had to learn how to do. So it's not always going to be this, like, it's learning kind of, it's like interviewing, job hunting versus learning how to walk. Humans have evolved to walk, and so naturally, you do have to learn, but you're going to figure out how to walk. Whereas, interviewing, job searching, these, you really have to, you can of course figure it out, but you can lean into resources. You can essentially develop a training plan, to interview well, to figure out what jobs you should be looking at, what career path you want to go down, what roles and titles you should be looking at. And so that's the beauty of it. So yeah, so kind of a cool progression there, but yeah, I'll stop there.
No, and I think it's a great analogy for our listeners, because running a race is very similar to recruiting and actually landing your dream job, right? And it's not a sprint. It really is a marathon, starting with an internship as a mile marker, right? Because
Hmm.
that job is the end goal. And I think that, and I'm sure you can attest to this being a runner yourself, that you don't just go into a marathon having never run before, right? You have to prepare. You have to make sure you have the necessary nutrition. You have to stretch before. And those are things as in networking, fine tuning your resume and LinkedIn, making sure that you tailor all those things to the job description, that you can research someone like yourself on a phone call, just like I did for this interview, and make sure that I'm asking relevant and insightful questions. So I think it is very much like a race. And instead of thinking that you're going to dread it and it's going to be horrible, why not try to go into it with an open mind and say, with networking, for instance, let me go try to meet some really awesome people like Amanda, who maybe I like to run also. And now I have a good, running connection. Maybe the next time I'm in Chicago, I hit you up and we go on a jog, whatever that may be. So I think changing your
Yeah.
mind is everything. And I think if you manifest that in the universe, things will turn and you'll do all the right things. So I do love that analogy. And I want to shift gears and dive a little bit deeper into just venture capital. And as someone who was part of a business school for undergrad, I think a lot of students, I don't want to say fall into the trap, but the mindset is you either do ABC, accounting, banking, or consulting. And obviously diving into the startup realm within VC is very different. So how do you know if VC is right for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think it's first off, kind of breaking down what's most important for you. So, a startup, you are naturally going to wear a lot of hats. That is truly inevitable. If you more so choose a role, I'd say, like accounting, even VC, especially on the investing side, even though you get to work on a lot of things, investment banking, you're basically going to be kind of on a set path, especially in investment banking and accounting. I know VCs can break off in a few different branches. But you have to kind of think about that. So, are you someone who is excited about wearing a lot of hats? Has that maybe been something you've had the chance to do already in the school setting or maybe in your internships? And kind of I'd say more high function individual, you like to have your hands in, a lot of different projects at any given time. Or would you rather feel a little bit more, I'd say, comfortable almost, knowing like I'm probably going to be doing this every single day. You kind of know what to expect. So I would think about that and kind of really hone in on like what do you feel more excited about, for you as a person, and then also too, for your little bit of a longer term career path, are you kind of similarly, are you going to want a place that is an environment that is has the inevitable change, is much more rapid speed, fast pace. You kind of never know what to expect. Like, of course, when you're at a startup, with the founders, you're talking about how you're going to scale. You're talking about the next quarter, the next fundraise, whatever it may be, and the product development. But changes happen a ton there. You could have only 10 months left of cash flow, and maybe not be getting good traction for a fundraise, and have to have the serious conversation about what if we don't make it. When I joined Packback, that's kind of the position that they were in before their Series A. And so, thinking about how you would handle those situations, and does that something that excites you, or is that something that truly does scare you of not knowing like what could happen? Whereas, again, going back to like the investment banking, accounting, those are much more stable career paths. So I would say, honestly, I know maybe not everyone out there will agree with me, but VC can kind of be a combo of both, especially if you find the right VC firm. So I would say, GSV Ventures definitely operates a lot like a startup. And I appreciate that. I am definitely someone who probably will either be at a startup or working in this space, work with startups for the at least the super long haul the rest of my career, because I love that. I love the kind of on edge sometimes, like, and getting to wear a lot of hats. That's just what I prefer. And so the VC side can definitely bring that into it, especially if you're in like the investment associate type role. There is a bit more of a track for you. There's a little bit more of a, you're going to have this in your day to day, but of course, especially here, our associates, aside from sourcing, doing diligence, and talking to founders every day, they also get to work on various other projects. We're very unique as well because we have the ASU GSV Summit tied in that the associates get to do a bit of work on too. So I think those are probably the two biggest things I would really recommend people to think about. And that's the beauty of interviewing, is that you really get to test out the waters a little bit. Now it's not, you directly working in these settings, but asking these very crucial questions to, how does the team function? What is a day in a life? What are things I can expect 6 months, a year into the role? And then, kind of tie that back into what you were feeling, asking yourself the question, do you want to wear a lot of hats? Do you want something, where you can expect what you're doing day to day? Do you want the more fast changing environment? Or do you want the more stable environment?
So could you quantify that in terms of a few key traits or attributes that most, maybe associates would have or possess inside a VC like GSV Ventures?
Yeah. So do you mean more so like personality traits?
Yes, personality traits, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, big things with that, I would say, what I was saying before, is, that kind of level of founder empathy. So, having a fairly high EQ, I think is really important. You have to really enjoy talking to people. You have to enjoy getting to know why, someone came up with this idea in the first place. And then have the tenacity and grit to really ask the key questions, to be able to set yourself up for success through the diligence process. You also have to be a very intrinsically motivated person. So high level, of work ethic, high, I'd say, relentless curiosity is super key. And then, kind of, being able to be someone who really starts to recognize patterns. So I would tie that into a few buckets of being very organized, very thoughtful, intentional, and curious in the questions you're asking and how you're thinking. And then also, too, the way that you track things. So I think all of these kind of play up into skills a little bit, but then also personality traits of just kind of the mindset that I think anyone in the VC space needs to have, especially if you're looking at, more of the associate role. But I would honestly carry that into any VC role regardless, because, even myself working with founders, talent, candidates, whether it be even more operational, you have to really pick up on these things. And you have to be curious in whatever the space you're in. Otherwise, there's probably no reason for you to be in it. So I would also say, selling or pardon into that is just, being proactive, as kind of going back to being intrinsically motivated. You have to be really excited every day. And so, yeah, so I mean, those are definitely a few, but, a few others can be broken down into the specifics of the team and how they operate. So I would tie in, being a very collaborative person, but also being someone who can operate really well autonomously, and being, okay with like structuring your day, knowing how and when, to manage up and ask questions with your team, and bringing forward ideas. I think, we're in a unique setting right now, of course, because pretty much everyone is still remote. But even beyond that, kind of knowing when to take things on, ask questions, but then also when to like pull in team members as well.
So let's say that there's a job candidate and he or she is listening to this podcast and he just heard all the personality traits that you mentioned. And this person says, wow, Amanda's basically describing who I am, all the personality traits fit, who I'm, what I am about. How would this person ideally break into VC, right? Are there certain entry points, or is it really just firm specific? And if they're doing well, they're hiring. And if they're not doing well, they're not hiring.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think there's a few kind of natural buckets, that exist of, you can enter VC pre-MBA, you can enter a VC post-MBA, or you can enter a VC at a coming out of, probably a product or like operational type of role at a startup. I'd say those are like the biggest three. And so I'd say more just focusing on those three, especially. So if you really align with those personality traits and you've told yourself, okay, I kind of want that mesh of, wearing a lot of hats, having, potential high volume change, but having a little bit of a stable kind of knowing what to expect in my day to day and my career path. You've checked all those boxes. Then I would kind of take a step back and say, okay, I've, done this in terms of internships already, or I've done this in my MBA. I've, done this at the startup that I've been at for a bit. And if you feel like you're ready to take that leap, I think the biggest thing is that you can start connecting, of course, with people in the VC space. So I would really try to reach out to a lot of the associates on the roles. So if you're looking at the investment side specifically, reach out to associates first and foremost to really get kind of a bird's eye view into their day to day. I would say 9 times out of 10, they're probably at least willing to have like a coffee chat with you, maybe answer some questions over email, and just be a little vulnerable with them. Say you're really excited to learn about what it's like to be in this role in VC, maybe to hear from them directly how they broke in and get some real life examples. I think that's really, really key. And then, also separately attend events, do networking. I know it's probably cliche to say that, but it really does go a long way. And within the VC space, I would say, the beauty of it is that everyone's in the VC space because they have to love networking in some way, shape, or form. It's a key aspect of their role, whether they're looking to meet founders, other thought leaders in the space, candidates, investors, and so, or just other entrepreneurs to collaborate with. So definitely take advantage of networking. Again, another beauty that I think has come out of the pandemic is that, and I think even going forward when everyone fully is back in office, I think there's going to still be a huge uptick of virtual events and conferences for people to attend. And then, of course, I think immediately after, when people are more vaccinated and it's safe, there's going to be a huge uptick of people wanting to go to in-person events. So take advantage of that, while you can, and while everyone's going. So yeah, so talking to people within the space directly, getting a lot of your questions answered, leaning into real life examples, and then networking, I'd say, are two of the biggest. And then, lean into the internships and stuff that you've had, especially if you're someone that's coming out of a school, whether it's pre-MBA or post-MBA. Ideally, especially if you're going through the MBA program, you're getting introduced to a lot of avenues that way. But really lean into the network that you're just naturally developing. So your professors, your classmates, the individuals that you're working with directly, your internships, et cetera. So really lean into them. And one thing that I've appreciated about I'd say any manager that I've had, especially in the last 6 years that I've been in talent and recruiting, especially my last manager at PackBack, and then my team here at GSV, is I really appreciate leaning into them and asking them, what can I be doing better, or how can I improve? And I'm truly someone who I appreciate learning from my failures and my mistakes. And I talk about that with candidates that I speak to every single day, and I want to hear oftentimes about mistakes that they've made and how they've chosen to come back from it. So I think, leaning into, how you've grown as an individual can tell you a lot about yourself. And I think this is really applicable to any job that you're interviewing for. But again, I think all circulating back to having a strong sense of founder empathy that is so much needed in the VC space. That'll really correlate well, and you can really kind of learn a lot about yourself, so that when you are interviewing, you can really be confident and say, maybe I've failed. I didn't get this internship, or I didn't get into this program, or I made this mistake and we didn't hit our sales goal that month or something. Whatever it is, they're all really learning experiences, and ideally, setting you on a much better track to be successful in the future if you can, get key takeaways from that. So long-winded response there, but yeah. So I mean, naturally, there's the three, buckets of, the pre-MBA, the post-MBA, coming out a startup yourself. But when you're really looking to branch into the VC space, lean into your network that you've developed, network yourself, go to events, go to demo days, and then reach out to people, talk to people that are actually in the jobs themselves. I'd say definitely lean into associates, but then, there are definitely partners out there that if you send them a LinkedIn message, or if you're at a networking event and you've connected with them on there, take advantage of that and then take the coffee chat with them.
And diving into the pre-MBA side for a second, if a lot of our listeners are undergraduate students and they're interested in VC, how can you break in or at least get a taste of a VC? Are internships very common, or is that not something very common? Even a post undergraduate full-time associate role.
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, so internships are definitely common, both pre MBA and post MBA. I'd say one thing that's really going to set you out. So, this may go without saying, especially for the audience listening in, but VC partners, investment team members. Well, I'll take a step back actually. So, it's the VC talent role in general. So, meaning a VC having a talent dedicated person still isn't all that common. I would say more VCs have someone in my role or a similar talent role, meaning they're the ones actually probably first getting a snapshot of who the individuals are interested in these internships, aka getting the emails and applications themselves. But sometimes those emails and applications may be going directly to the partners or the investment team. And so emails can definitely get lost. But with that said, that's more so just kind of a for food for thought. A big thing is that you have to reach out with intention. So if you're especially looking to get an internship at any VC, I would say reach out to their team with, have done especially if you want to be on the investment side, do a bit of research before. So some of my favorite people that have actually been hired on since I joined at GSV for internships specifically, have emailed cold outreach to our team or connected with us on LinkedIn and actually showcased to us a bit of research that they've done. So specifically, something within the ed tech space, they've been, doing landscaping work, they've been doing market mapping, they, present us with potential deals, and they've done a bit of diligence work, and they've really showcased, why they're excited about GSV, the ed tech sector, for us specifically, and can really show us already that they understand the area that we invest in and the type of founders that we work with. Like you were saying before, especially now, 2021, you can research just about anything. And that's the beauty of the VC space. You can, take a look at portfolio companies. You can take a look at their thesis. You can take a look at maybe the evolution of the funds that they've had and maybe how their thesis has changed a little bit. You can take a look at the backgrounds and experience sets of every single team member. Find out, how long they've been around. Dig into the managing partner and find out what their vision for, that VC firm is. And so going into it with that, I would say, the research that you're going to put in, the time and energy that you're going to put into that will pay off. I can't stress that enough. We have primarily hired the interns spring, summer, and fall that have reached out to us, whether it's for it's kind of investment focused, project manager focused, operational focused. So that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice.
So if I'm interested in maybe I have an upcoming interview or a coffee chat with you, and I'm about to go on Google and start researching, what would be some key items that you think are the most critical aspects to research for GSV or any VC?
Yeah, good question. So, kind of a few of the points that I was mentioning earlier. So, first off, take a look around the ventures, website. I'd say pretty much all of them have their team pages. They have their portfolio. They probably have other reports, metrics, and things like that that they're going to be showcasing. So, figure out all of that. And honestly, tying into this response. One of my biggest pieces of advice too, especially when you're going through any interview process, whatever format you prefer, but make yourself some sort of spreadsheet that you can just keep yourself organized in. So I've done this with any interview process I've ever been through, because you're likely not interviewing with just one place or wanting to reach out to just one place. So make a quick spreadsheet where you can keep everything organized for each company that you're going to be researching or talking to, and start to compile everything in there. So I would honestly break it down by team overview, maybe just a few highlights of team members, bios, or things that you can have as talking points, or maybe you realize you can relate to someone on the team and you can use that as a conversation point during an interview. Also, I'd say definitely find out, of course, like the investing stage that they're in, their thesis, the type of sector. Are they very sector focused? Are they agnostic? Have they changed or evolved over the years? Meaning, like, Did they start out as a more early stage fund, but maybe today they invest in later stage growth stage as well? And, and so it's not just one area anymore. So try to figure all of that out, so that you're not, on the interview and you're like, oh gosh, I said the wrong thing, by something you could easily Google or find out on their website. So just, tying into the role specifically, do your diligence work on that. That's really the biggest thing. And then oftentimes too, VC firms, whether it's on their website, which usually they are, or you can take a look at their social media pages, you can start to find out key components of their strategy. So again, going back to whether they're very sector focused or agnostic, then you can start to do a little bit more research into that area. So then again, you have talking points or maybe things that you can showcase to the team prior of, say, oh my gosh, did you see, so and so is now a unicorn, or so and so might be a good potential company to invest in, or I know this founder and think what they're about to be building is really cool and something GSV or that VC firm specifically should be looking into. Other times too, there might be a bit more around the framework, or I'd say more so like the guiding like principles or something that the VC will use. Usually this falls into like how the investment team will lead their diligence work. So the key things that they're looking into when they are going to be investing in a company. So, for GSV, we use our 5P framework. So we really dig into the people. It's, the core purpose, of course, the product, the predictability, the potential. And so we dig into all of those things because we want to understand who the people are that made this team, their purpose behind it. We want to understand like where it's going, how it can scale, so the predictability behind that. We dig into the product itself, usually using it ourselves, asking advisors or friends and family sometimes to use it. We do a lot of referencing in our diligence, so understanding like if it's not a product we're going to be using, is it teachers, is it professors, is it students, getting feedback from them. So that's just for us specifically, but all of this is usually readily available, whether it's on their website and their blog posts, social media. So find these things out and really just highlight them so that you can bring them up as conversation points. Ideally, these are things that you kind of intertwine into your outreach as well when you're even just reaching out to someone, especially if it's a cold outreach. You want to go into that type of setting, especially with an interview, with as much tools in your tool belt as you can. So I would say always lean toward the side of doing maybe a little too much research and have kind of again, an organized spreadsheet or something showing it all so that you can have these talking points. And through that, naturally, you're going to have questions. Ideally, you are someone that's, very curious. So through that research, you're going to develop questions. I would jot those down, that you're going to be curious about and asking the team about, why do you only focus in ed tech? Why is this your core mission? Or why did you develop this framework when it comes to investing?
I think that was a masterclass in how to do in-depth research, and masterclass fun for everyone listening because MasterClass is one of the companies that, of course, GSV Ventures has been investing in, and they're doing very, very well. And you spoke about interviews, and obviously, for most companies, there are behavioral questions where it's, tell me about yourself, and also, why do you want to work at this company? But what are some more VC-specific interview questions that candidates should be aware of prior to entering that interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, again, it's going to be a little different across every firm. So I can really speak to for us specifically, some insider tips and tricks. But I would say first and foremost, I'm super excited to hear about like the career path on why VC. That might sound super cliche, but really, what we're leaning in and listening in for is how curious of an individual you are and how you really see VC fitting into your career path. Because first and foremost, I know others out there will know this. VC and really I'd say the startup world is not for everyone. Again, going back to VC, kind of meshing a bit of the stable with the unpredictability type of atmosphere. It's not a career path for everyone. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of dedication, because it's a space, like you were saying before, it is super, super active. And so it takes that kind of mindset. So asking why VC, it's usually, those are the types of things we're leaning into and curious about. We want to hear examples of, especially for the investment side, how you've developed and grown in your financial modeling, some of the diligence and deal flow that you've already ideally have worked on. If you can speak to that, how have developed like your sourcing strategy is. So again, going back to like organization and tracking pattern recognition, a lot of that naturally is going to be developed through sourcing, talking to founders, and there's a ton of different strategies, things that are always being changed, but really, start to, if you're going into any interview, kind of hone down what your sourcing strategies are. You know what they are, you're doing it every single day, but kind of keep that up in your mind as just something to kind of speak through. And then really, leaning in and asking about how you've relationship built, how you've networked, how you're looking to grow your career from here, how you've taken on initiatives or projects, within your teams. That's a big one because most of, VC is, especially the leadership team, rarely are they going to tell you in depth, like how to do things. They really lean into the team to become the experts and ask the questions to figure out how to do things. So questions like that, speak to, oh, I got assigned to this project and I was able to, ask these questions and kind of formulate this method to reach this goal, whatever it might be. But knowing that, you're not going to have this micromanaged type of atmosphere where you have someone telling you exactly how to do something every single day. You really have to be the one that's proactive and figure out how to do a lot of things. Of course, you're going to have mentors and leaders as guides, and you'll be able to ask questions for feedback. But you have to be able to do that. So those are big ones. But when it comes to like a lot of the core skill sets, it's going to be questions around financial modeling. It's going to be questions around your diligence process, how you typically manage that. Questions around your technology acuity and your product savviness. So especially when you're looking at, for a lot of people, I'm sure are going to be focusing on some form of VC that's in a tech related atmosphere. Not always the case, but regardless of it is or it isn't. So technology, obviously, not every VC firm is going to require individuals to be or have an engineering background or computer science background. I'd say oftentimes people are more so like, economics, financial type backgrounds, a little bit more holistic. But you should be able to have a bit of a pretty strong skill set around technology and understanding of like, how things might break and what questions to ask, and kind of just being able to leverage that type of mindset of just technology and product savviness. And then I would say also, social community building, networking, again, going back to things that hopefully you're already doing, but that's a very natural thing in the VC space. It really never ends. So again, also going back to relationship building. So I would say another thing too is just how you do research, which I know we were just talking about, but in your day to day and how you apply that to your job. So are you someone who does read a lot of articles, you follow the news, you follow the trends, also tying back to pattern recognition. So I think a lot of these core things all kind of weave in and out of each other, kind of just in the overarching aspects of the role.
I don't even know how to respond to that between your insight into research and your insight into the interview process. I mean, I feel like I'm learning so much, and I'm sure our audience is learning even more. And for everyone out there trying to figure out how can I, make this insight actionable, that I just checked actually, and the jobs page on GSV Ventures LinkedIn page has a new role that just got posted for an associate role that I think was posted 1 week ago. So everyone out there, make sure to check that out and use this insight to break into a company like GSV. And I want to be mindful of your time, Amanda. And, I've learned so much today. And I guess the last question, a tradition we have on the show, all the audience knows where I'm going with this, is what is the best piece of advice that you can give to our audience to help them get past the final round interview and land the job offer?
Yeah, great question. I love the final round name and just whole play into this. I appreciate it, being an athlete myself. So no, totally. And the interview process really is, it can feel like that. So when you're in that final round, I think one of my biggest pieces of advice, aside from, I won't dive super far into like the research and tracking and having questions ready to go. We've talked about that. But try to really appreciate the fact that you really should never be nervous for an interview. I'd say, that's one of the biggest things. I actually get very shocked when people are nervous because it's not a test. There is, elements of pass and fail. You get the job or you don't. But it really is a two-part conversation. You're trying to figure out if they're the right fit for you and your career and the team that you want to work on, just as much as they're trying to figure out if you're going to be the right fit for their team. Sometimes it is, yeah, maybe the two of you just don't work out well, in terms of maybe you don't have the right skill set or experience just yet. So lean into that. Even if it is a conversation you walk away from not getting that job, know that that's okay. Again, going back to failure, mistakes, that's just a valuable learning experience for you, and ideally even more fuel under your belt to be able to go into the next round for your next interview processes, to just have more quote unquote fighting power and to do better. So lean into that. Ideally, always ask for feedback. People will always give it. Email them afterward, thank them for their time, ask them for feedback, and just explain to them that you want to grow. This won't be the last time they see you, especially if it's at a dream company or team that you want to work with. But again, yeah, try not to be nervous. Be very confident first off that you've made it to that final round. That's something that a very small other set of people can actually say. I would say a good kind of measurement, you can, imagine 100 applicants, maybe 40, 50 of those were ones that the application got, sent as, yes, we'll talk to you. And then out of that 40 or 50, probably only 15 or 20 of those got, pushed forward into like actual consideration. And then usually, 7 to 10 of those are ones that are going to be talking further with the team. And then usually it's likely only 2 or 3, in that final round. So know that you've already essentially, battled 98 people roughly, or, 98% of the applicant pool to make it to where you are now. So try not to be nervous, just be confident, know that it's more of a conversation than anything else. And then, yeah, I mean, if you're in that final round, just be excited for yourself, and really just lean into the potential of you being a part of that team. I'd say another good piece of feedback is start to, especially in that final round, by that point you've ideally gotten to know a good bit of the team and you've made a little bit of a relationship foundation there. Start to talk about yourself as if you're on the team already. It's another thing that I'm actually surprised not a lot of candidates will do. I've tried to do that in interview processes that I've been in. So start to say, I or we will get to do this, or I will help spearhead this, or whatever it might be, because I guarantee that's going to make that team, speaking to you at that point in time, take a step back and be like, okay, yeah, like, this person actually does see themselves here, and it's going to kind of get naturally their wheels spinning of like, yeah, that this person's actually are they on my team, or are they not? And, maybe we should hire them. So hopefully that's helpful advice.
Well, there you have it, Amanda. What a pleasure having you on the show. I feel like the audience, myself, we've been running right beside you and just crossed the finish line for the 10th marathon to add to your list of marathons. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we have to have you back soon.
Yeah, AJ, I'll be back anytime. I appreciate it.